Aurora, Kayo, and Florian may lead the way, but for Blitz the Skirmish season, things are wide open. The Week 1 data is back, so let's look at the results, go over the LL data, and with 6.5 points per win on the table, and the multiplier in play, things could get interesting.
A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando.
Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to the channel, and thanks for tuning in today for continued coverage of Blitz Skirmish Season 12. That's right, coming to you with the roll-up following the data, which did come out about 3-ish hours before I shot this. I ran over to the spreadsheet, had to make some changes to count wins versus points to make things make sense. Don't worry, we'll talk through it. But yeah, let's start by going through the Week 1 actual win data. We'll go over to LSS's image. Now, there were 84 logged events so far. Do keep in mind that, every now and then you get late events that come through, so we may see more trickle in as we go. But the number we'll be using for Week 1, as reported today, was based on 84 wins. So we have Aurora, Kayo, and Florian leading the charge at 8 wins apiece. Blaze and Verdance, that's right, Verdance, at 6. ASC pulling 5, Datadol pulling 5, Dromai with a cheeky 4. And we had a band of 3s there at Dorinthea. That's a Quickie P, actually, not Dorinthea, which is relevant for today's discussion. So Quickie P, we have OG Prism, Riptide, Vincent, Database Dash, and then Syndra. And then Valda actually pulled down 2, as did Zen and Auxilio. And then we had 10 other heroes at the 1, which is Betsy, New, Terra. Little surprised Terra didn't do better. Flattering Bravo, the new Bravo. Puffin pulling one down, which is awesome. And Azalea, a Benji, a Boltyn, a Phi, and a Levia. So 84 wins, which means that those 8 represented just shy of 10%, is like 9 and change percent. So that's a pretty good breakdown overall, right? I mean, to say things are wide open doesn't mean you can come with anybody and win. Let's be very clear here. But there's a lot of heroes that could come in and win. And I mean, I want to talk first. Can we, Verdance? I'm really surprised by that. I thought she was, I know she's good, but I thought without Stormstrider, she was going to be in a rough spot, but I guess not. So that's going to be very interesting to track. I do have to wonder if it's because people skewed away, in many cases, from Oasis, and they were instead playing Arcane Polarity. I do wonder if that wasn't relevant. We do see, Blaze doesn't surprise me as much. 5 points, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know in terms of where I thought she was going to land, but if you go and you looked at the, it wasn't necessarily the best 6 heroes of the season, but it was the 6 heroes that were definitely going to be at your skirmish. We had Aurora, Kayo, and Florian in there. I had Quickie P, ASC, and I had Blaze. And you see that they all did quite well. Now, to say that Dorinthea is at the top of the list is not true just because she falls at the top of the 3. She's in that band with the 3s. But you do see that those 6 are in there. Now, Datadol, I know is very good, but I don't think necessarily, the part of the reason I didn't include Datadol in that original list was I didn't think necessarily every meta was going to have a Datadol. She's pretty hard to play. She can whiff. I mean, she can explode too. But I think it's going to be very hard for the vast majority of the folks out there to do very, very, very well with Datadol. But as we saw in yesterday's recap, Anthony did take ours down. Right, so now let's go over to the season. Now, here's what's surprising more than anything is they are offering 6.5 points per event. That is how the math works, because if you go and you look at heroes, right, and with the multiplier, you do the thing, 6.5 points. I just assumed they would round down to the nearest whole point, but I guess with the multiplier and the fact that they're keeping fractional points now, I guess they don't have to. I'm just really surprised that it's 6.5 points per event, but hey, it is what it is. So that's actually more points per hero than we were expecting. Now, what's interesting here is if you go look at the actual points earned this season by tallying where people started and where they are now and then doing the subtraction, right? Super complicated spreadsheet math. We end up with 593 actual points scored. But the potential points were only 546, which is the opposite of what we have been seeing in Classic Constructed, where the actual points have been lower than the potential points offered, right? So meaning in Classic Constructed, if they had offered, let's say, 1,000 points a season, we've been seeing them log like 800, maybe 600, somewhere in that range. I'm just ballparking, right? But in this case, we saw more points get realized than were technically available, which means that older heroes are disproportionately winning. And that's an interesting statement, because if we go to, I'll throw, the spreadsheet across the screen right now. Now, in this image, the spreadsheet has been sorted from top to bottom based on who has earned the most living legend points this season, not necessarily who's won the most events. They roughly correlate, but you can see someone like Florian with his 1/2 multiplier is not at the top. So that becomes quite relevant for this discussion of the older heroes winning more or us realizing more points, is if you go look at the top of this table, you have Kayo and Aurora at 1 multiplier, so that's flat even. But then you have Data Doll or an Arachne ASC at 1.5, and then look at that whole group of 1.5s in terms of who's been performing. Very, very, very interesting. Now, sure, you have Florian, who was a big winner, who's at that 1/2 multiplier, but the large chunk up there is 1.5. That is for certain a wave of 1.5. Okay. So just to put things in perspective, this version of the spreadsheet goes top down in terms of who has the most current living legend points. Actually, that's not true. This is sorted into it's sorted from top to bottom in ascending order of who has the most or who has the least wins left to gain. That's why you still see Dorinthea, Bravo, and stuff at the top. They have a large number of points. And we look at this table for the purpose of highlighting who is closest to LLing from the raw math of what would they need to win this season. Now, when we started off the season, we looked at what they'd need over the course of the season. Now, since we have 1 week under our belt, you can see that those numbers have changed, and that Dorinthea at this point would have to win 7.3% next week to LL out, and then 6% by week 3. Okay. So it's a lot more pressure on her than it was before because of the no points being added and what remains left in the season. Now, returning back to the sorting of the top performers, I want to go ahead and highlight where kind of the overall top performers are in terms of risk of them leaving. And here's where I promised you things would get interesting. The top performers you can see are really not in any true risk of leaving. So Kayo would have to win 18.6%, because remember the numbers changed because we went from 6, our estimate last week, to 6.5. So it does change that. But Kayo by week 3 at 18%, that would be a double win rate to what he has right now, right? So he's currently winning 9. This week 1, he won 9.5. So he would have to double his win rate for the rest of the season in order to LL by week 3. Okay, so with him at the top of being the most at risk in terms of what he has to do, or I should say, combining what he has to do with the fact that he is winning aggressively, he's probably going to be around. Blaze Firemind only needs 14% by the end of the season. That is doable, but again, that's double what her win rate was last week at 7% win rate. And then if you go down and you look at, even Prism would need 16%, which is 3 times the win rate we saw from her. Point is, to take home, none of these heroes in the top are poised to explode. Now, though, if we go down to the bottom, Dorinthea and Bravo, is Bravo going to win 10%? No. But Dorinthea only needs 6%. Okay? That only correlates to 14 wins. That seems pretty undoable, given the 2 weeks left and the fact that the third week is about half as many points as was this week and next week. Doesn't seem super doable. But again, that 6.5 does make things interesting in terms of the aggressiveness, because that basically means that a 1.5 hero taking a win correlates to 10 points. That's a pretty big deal, right? So every win for this season counting for 10 points, even if it doesn't actually manifest this season, every single win for an old hero is huge. I should say it's significant. I don't know, it's huge, but it's pretty significant. Okay. So that's what I find. I wasn't a bait and switch when I came in here that things get interesting. That 6.5 with the multiplier, that's a lot, right? So even if Dorinthea pulls down 1 or 2, pretty cool. Like what could potentially happen here. Again, Bravo is not going to, he needs 24 wins. That's not going to happen, right? But hey. So that's the recap where we stand. Let's go ahead and go back and just look at the breakdown overall and talk, right, who might make movements based on what we're seeing. Given that Aurora's doing a little better than I thought she would do, if I'm being honest, and I can't help but wonder if this field, let's say the field goes in and responds to basically this idea, I think you could potentially see ASC go up. I think Blaze probably stays right where she is because of the Florian thing. But I have to wonder if like Prism doesn't have a breakout week somewhere along the line. I do think there's a risk in like Guardian heavy areas of like an OG Prism trying to show up to maybe prey on that. And I wouldn't be shocked if, I mean, clearly if Jermaine did as well as she did, certain metas aren't running poppers or aren't respecting the poppers, right? Because it only takes a couple to like stop a Ashwing train or something like that and kind of effectively IP them a couple times. So that's very interesting as well. So I do wonder if like maybe things don't change there. I don't know. Let me know what you all are thinking. It's very interesting. And the Verdance thing has me interesting. I freaking love Skirmish season. Let me know what you're thinking, folks. I love it all. Go Commando.